Well, hello, Paradigm Shifters. Yep, it's Transformation Tuesday again. Hello. Yes, and so grateful that we've been on this journey together since March 2020. I believe
Wow.
like 3 years, Wes. Isn't that great? And so Paradigm Shifters is, a community, a growing global community dedicated to shift and uplift the planet. How's that for you?
Power,
No codependency there. We're taking on all of them.
powerful. I love
And we keep growing every week, and because we're in a journey. We are on and in a journey. And so for March 2023, I am so grateful to invite my friends who I know have had a blessed and incredible journey through circumstance, conditions, situations that, whatever, and have made it to another side for a while. Then there's another side. So honoring the journey, March 2023. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to my good friend, Wes Phillips. We've been friends for many years, have seen each other through lots of stuff. So
Hey,
Wes,
Judy.
yeah, come on in here, Wes. It's all
Great
yours.
to see you.
Tell us about this journey and any insights you can tell us.
Well, right off the bat, I want to make sure everybody knows everything is all right, all right, all right. One of my favorite reads was a required reading by my sponsor, and it was the first chapter says, "I'm not okay, you're not okay, and that's okay." And that's not the book I remember on Dad's pastoral shelf in his ministry office that said, "I'm not okay, you're not okay." And I don't even know, I think that was some transactional analysis book, but I remember from the beginning, that sounded not very hopeful to me. But when I read The Spirituality of Imperfection, and that first chapter said, "I'm not okay, you're not okay, and that's okay," I thought everything was all right, all right, all right. So great to be with you guys, Judy. I'm really happy to see something that you touch and influence blossoming in such a way. It's just right. Things are right in the world. If my friend Judy is the impetus behind a beautiful message of paradigm shifting in the world.
To tell us where you're coming in from, what you're doing, a little bit about your past. I know that you were a singer, and tell us all about that. And yeah.
Well, I'm sitting in my office slash bedroom in Austin, Texas, and I own and operate a men's sober house called Austin Sober Living. We've been around since the summer of 2011. I was a mortgage guy for 25 years after probably 5 or 10 years in full-time ministry. Became a mortgage guy, and toward the tail end of that, some business climate started to change, and I thought, what else could I do for the world besides help people get into homes, which was getting more and more stressful. And I said, "God, what do I have?" And he said, "Well, you've got this property you bought when you were a young man before your beard turned white, and maybe there's something you could do with that." So a couple of my business buddies had been whiteboarding some ideas with a few months about sober living. And basically, for those of you that don't know, men come out of treatment, and we found out they were relapsing at an alarming rate because they were going back home and falling back into old ruts. And we learned that they could room up like a frat house with no booze. It's fun. We cut up, we have a blast, but they find out you can do it sober, and they find out together. So you got 7, 8, 9 guys all swimming the same direction in the stream for the most part. And we started Austin Sober Living almost 12 years ago. And I was fortunate to get sober when I was 30, and I, in August, walked across the room and got a 33-year chip for continuous sobriety. And that's just, I sure didn't set out to do that. I just needed some people off my back. I needed to start over. And I went to treatment, and those people, they knew what was going on with me, like they'd known me all my life. And I knew when those people in whom the problem had been solved laid this kit of spiritual tools at my feet and said, you can take them or not. I'd never had anybody not shove it down my throat, but instead lay it at my feet. I thought, I really wanted to try this. So at 30 and a pastor, thinking I sort of knew a little something about God, I listened to some other people for a minute, and I sat in a little circle. They pulled me aside one day and said, please stop trying to facilitate the group. You're just another bozo on the bus. I was very offended by that. And then I realized they were right about that. And so I guess I got a little more teachable as life went on, but at 30, I got sober. And so when I decided to do men's sober living, it was just a matter of showing a few other beggars where this beggar found bread. That's really all it was. You know, somebody showed it to me, and I thought, well, I've got a place I can house these guys with a little creativity and a little offer up in Craigslist. We could furnish the house, and the next thing you know, we're up and going. We have, I don't know how many hundreds of men have come through here in 10 or 20, but it's exhilarating and frustrating and beautiful, and I want to bonk myself in the head for doing it. And I want to thank God for letting me doing it every day. And pretty much that whole emotional variation floats through a little bit every day. So that's what I'm currently doing. So thanks for asking about that.
Yeah, you know what? I would love to have that. That's so awesome, because that's the journey. I was wondering if you could tell us a story about your singing and all of that journey. About that in your voice, because I know that you're a singer.
Sure.
And tell us about your voice.
I was born into a family of singers. I grew up in a community, a church community called Church of Christ, which was a cappella. So the only instrument you ever see, I don't have one handy, is a little round thing that blows the pitch. And so if the song's in E flat, at least the leader knows what key you're starting in. And then this congregation of people that might be 50 people or 600 people will sing 4-part harmony to just about any kind of hymn you've ever heard. It's one of the most beautiful sounds ever, but it was it was a unique way to grow up. It's not what I was listening to on the radio in my Pinto before I walked in, but I walked in these church doors, and we had this interesting style of music. Well, what happens as a kid, if your parents are both musicians and singers, is that you learn how to sing parts from the time you're a little kid. So I sang probably as quick as I was walking. I was probably singing a little song. My mom was the greatest 2-year-old teacher in the history of the church, and she sang those little songs around the house all day. So I know all the classics. And I started singing when I was very young, and they would march me up to the front of the room and say, look, Wes is going to sing a little something for you. And from the time I was a kid, they pushed me out to the front of the stage. So by the time I got to high school, auditioning for musicals, I got a chance to be in the chorus. Then I started getting the lead in the musical, and it was really, found out that was scary and really fun. Went off to school at Abilene Christian and did some more singing, musicals, talent shows, and I traveled with a group all over the world. We went to Europe twice, went to Hawaii, and promoted the university and sang in a group of about 16 voices, and started to recognize I had something pretty unique that God gave me, and I was real grateful to be using it. I've always been a first tenor. I didn't know that till I got to college. I was singing baritone in high school for some mislabeled reason. And I, my first day in opera with my opera teacher, he took me up to a really high note I didn't know I had, and taught me I was a first tenor, kind of an unusual, really gifted first tenor. And I got to sing these great experiences in college. And then afterward, I came home to Austin and I sang in the Austin Lyric Opera for a couple of seasons. And that was fabulous, doing shows like Aida and Fidelio. Those were unbelievable opportunities to meet other singers. And I came from a small pond. So when I landed in the big pond and found out I wasn't the only decent singer around, there's some great singers in the world, it really pulled me up by the bootstraps. And I had opportunities. I guess the last, so I sang until I was 40, and here's the reason why. I closed a show at Fiesta, Texas, where I got to play the Angel Gabriel in a show called The Majesty of Christmas for 2 seasons down there. I think it was around 2000 was the last year. And I hung on a little 2-wire harness above the stage with 8-foot iridescent wings and hair a little longer than this. And they had it all shiny and sparkly because I was an angel, of course. And I got to sing this beautiful tenor aria that says to the shepherds in the field, don't be afraid. This God that your night has just been interrupted by is on your side. He's not here to scare the crap out of you. He's here to bring good news and tell you about this child that'll be born. So I got the opportunity to do a role I probably would never get again. Super Trooper spotlights hitting me 30 feet above the stage. I've got 2 female angels swinging up and down both sides, and full cast below. And it was just an amazing moment. I closed the show on December 30th. 1999, and I went the next day to St. David's Hospital in Austin to have surgery on my neck for a herniated disc that was causing me lots of pain over a couple of years. And I'd tried a whole bunch of other alternative therapies. This finally decided to take the risk of the surgery, and was told 1 in 1,000 has an occasional incident that will hurt your voice, but it's very, very rare. Well, I turned out to be that guy. I had the surgery, and the doctor somehow cut or stretched my recurrent laryngeal nerve, and it paralyzed my right vocal cord. And that has been permanent. That's over 20 years ago now. And it was my last gig. I got the chance to do the tenor work on Handel's Messiah that same season, a few weeks before, and then the close of show at Fiesta, Texas. And that's the last sung publicly, and that's been 20 something years ago. So abrupt change, paradigm shift, if you will, not the kind I like, not the kind I wanted, not what I expected, but it gave a big old jolt, and Wes got to wonder and wander over a period of years, wondering, well, then if I'm not the singer anymore, who am I? And that brings us to about age 40, and that was a real significant turn in my story. I sort of slid the guitar under the bed and stopped going to auditions, and told the director of the show in San Antonio at Fiesta, Texas, wanted me to come to Branson to take the lead, The Promise, which is a perennial show in a theater out there, dreamed about for years. And I had to call him that spring and say, I have an injury to my voice. I don't know if it's permanent, but I won't be there this spring. And it turned out to be permanent. So I have lived with a voice that's sometimes a little crackly. It sounds pretty good today. Some days it's kind of gravelly, kind of Joe Cocker. Some days it's a little higher, like Sting, or but this is who I am today. And it required some more of that teachability. It required some more of that pliability, some more of that breaking down of self-will to see what my higher power had for me next.
Yeah, well, during that time, I remember that, and the the feelings that come up, resentment, anger, all that stuff. Could you talk about, I know people who in here who are working right now, and we're just coming out of like a 3-year period of whatever you want to call it, COVID, and now it's what's next. I can't go back, this and that, and there's resentment, the anger, the fear, the doubt. And I know you've worked with many people, especially in your sober living, I imagine, coming out. What is it? Can you tell us about what those voices were saying, the process, and something about that breakthrough experience?
I can. Boy, it's amazing. Years later, the wound that came with that experience is still tender, and I don't know what I thought about how wounds heal in the human spirit, but I guess I thought it would cauterize over like a physical wound, and I'd notice it. But it's tender. Years later, it is tender when I talk about that loss. And it was more than the loss of my voice. It was, as you heard me say, it was the loss of my identity. It was the loss of who I am. And I learned a few things during that time. One thing that I learned, but maybe stronger than I had ever believed before, is that God was big enough to take whatever emotion I had as I walked through it. And I wasn't sure about that at first, because the way I grew up, certain emotions were off limits when it came to God. You are to revere God, you are to respect and fear God, but you probably better not tell God what you think about his choice of events, or unless you have your lightning rod up, and because God, the cosmic fly swatter, is just waiting on me to say the wrong thing, and all of a sudden I'm bug guts on the windshield, and that might sound trite, but I grew up in a way that I had a lot of fear of God. And so I had a lot of fear of my own emotions and what was in bounds and what was out of bounds, and a serious moment, at least in my case, like this, and compared to some of you and the losses you've experienced, that this may not rate comparatively, but wounds are wounds in the human spirit. And I learned that God was big enough to let me scream and holler and blog and spew and tell some other people that I thought I was supposed to lead in one direction, another direction. In my mind, I'm like, well, you're not just you. People follow you sometimes as a leader. If you talk disrespectfully about God or questioning about God, what if you lead a bunch of people down this primrose path and you just take them right over the cliff with you? Then what? So I felt a lot of pressure about it, but as we've all learned, if you've got black-eyed peas in the pressure cooker and that heat's on full blast, you better open that little vent at some point or that pot's going to blow up. And I blew up a few times trying to understand my emotions around it. How in the world could a God of mercy give me a gift like that, where best I could tell, I was carrying the message for the kingdom, for God, for love, for the world, the best that I could? How in the world could he let something like that be taken away in such a random, rare, this never happens, but it happened to me kind of way? How in the world is there a God that allows that? Well, a whole bunch of you are way ahead of me on that question, because I think most of us have experiences all the time where we ask that question. And it's a question I love for people to ask me nowadays, because I have wrestled with that question. There's stories in the Bible about people who wrestled with God. One of them is a man who had a dream once that he was on a ladder on his way to heaven, and he wrestled an angel on the way up that ladder, and he woke up, and physically his hip was out of joint the next day. So there's been some precedent to this wrestling with God thing. And so he and I wrestled, and I'm pretty sure my hip and maybe some other stuff was out of joint for a while. I know my heart was out of joint for a good long while, just trying to understand what was going to be next and why that could have happened, and what did I do wrong, and should I have gone to a different surgeon, and I second guessed and did all those things. And I think at the core of it, Judy, is a challenge we all face, and that is fear. That is, if I'm not this, then what am I? I'm afraid there's nothing here. What if I'm not enough? What if now without this, I am not enough? How in the world can someone think that their singing voice is what makes them enough? Well, I for a long time, I rode that horse and one was gone. And that's the danger of hitching my enough wagon, my okayness wagon, to some aspect of my possessions, or what I do for a living, or what I look like, or how my body functions. Because as we all know, ain't none of us getting out of this thing alive, and life is throwing curve balls at us all the time. And most of you have profound stories like this, where you came to this question, and the fear of who am I? If not this, then who am I? Is certainly a question that I think we all wrestle with. I got some help with the fear thing, a lot of help along the way, a lot of great therapists. A broken marriage came after this. I'm sure I was not easy to live with, but I poured my guts into trying to make that work. Lots of couples therapy, lots of individual therapy, and we came to where we are today. And I was driving one day in about mid 2020, just after the first 3 weeks to flatten the curve. Everybody remembers that, 3 weeks, but it didn't move, as we all know now. And I saw a sign in a yard, and it was a scripture verse from the Bible. And it didn't have the verse, it just had the address of this scripture. And I wish I could tell you what. I'd have to look it up to tell you. It was in the book of James. God did not give us the spirit of fear. He gave us a spirit of power, love, and sound mind. And I thought, man, who is that lady with the sign in her yard? I made a lap around the block and came back by and looked at it again. And I looked it up again, and that was it. For God did not give us a spirit of fear. He gave us a spirit of power, love, and sound mind. And for 3 years, that has been my mantra. I wrote it down everywhere. And that's one of the things I do is I write things on cards, and I somewhere along the way, I learned how to write kind of neat. So I make things that look kind of calligraphy like, and I put one on my dashboard, there's one on the mirror over there. I got one in my wallet. There's wherever where I look, it has this quote word for word, because I had to coach myself or allow the universe to coach me into a new way to see myself. The world was in the fear selling business, and they wanted me in that fear and doubt and lack of knowing the future. And so just walking around terrified. And I said, that's not who I am. Now, admittedly, a good length of that time was me trying to convince myself of that. But that's what things like that do. That's why you have so many great teachers who give you affirmations and teach you to write things down. Somebody taught me that a long time ago. I have some other great things written on my mirror in there that remind me to stay in the moment, that remind me to focus on what the universe is doing, because I know where this ego is going to take me. It's been dragging me there my whole life. And it tried to tell me, if you're not the singer anymore, then you're not enough. And if you can't control some kind of pandemic that has the whole world by the throat, then you're not enough. Somehow you ought to be able to live above that, beyond that. And I had to be really affirmed. And I did two things. I kept that in front of me, and I stayed in the middle of the herd using a tool called Zoom, which we are using now, until we were able to get back together face to face. And it was not soon enough, in my opinion, but I'm really glad to be giving Judy a hug again instead of just the Zoom hug. So I'm glad we're back face to face. But that's sort of how I got to where I am at this point, Judy.
What a beautiful, beautiful story. I'm going to take with me is God can handle all my emotions. And where I heard the other day, another thing, and I love it because I'm always hearing things that I need to hear at that moment in time, in this time of my life, 2023, I have to remind myself. And one of the things I heard was, I am responsible for the energy I bring into this home. And she said it is right inside her door, and she reads that. Whatever energy, if she's bringing in her anger, her fear, and everything, boy, that's a disease. It'll spread. And I remember once we go to this conference together, up in the mountains. Yeah. And I remember a speaker saying, look around you, your addictions to rage, to all of those things are affecting at least 10 people. And then there was dead silence. And then he said, your recovery affects at least 10 people. Like, oh, okay. Keep on the path, keep the working. Yeah. So yeah, and that really triggered me. But the one is, I am responsible for my energy when I go out. Like if I'm in all my emotions, it's my job to own them and not take them out on other people, places, or things. So
was it Mother Teresa who said, she's credited, and I think it's been said by many, but go into the world and take the good news, and if necessary, use words. There's a place in the New Testament that says, we are the aroma of the Christ in our lives. As we move through the world, we are the aroma of Christ. We are the aroma of beauty. We are the aroma of the beautiful universe, or we're not. And that's what I hear you saying. It's humbling to realize that your footprint in a room or in a herd of other people has such impact. But to him who is given much is expected in return. Used to weigh heavy on me. Today I feel grateful to be able to carry the message. But I've sat in lots of meetings with Judy, and she's heard my confessional as well, about not carrying the message well and what that looks like to people. Oh, here's a guy that's been in recovery a long time and he's acting like that. Well, I wonder, and so thank God for the safety valve of one of our steps that lets us go and make amends for things we didn't do right the first time. I've needed that many times.
Yeah, I want to touch on one other thing before we close, is that step, that the amends. And I just think, well, I feel like that's one of the most important steps. Owning your part. And I often say, so I wish I would have known that years ago, but you know what? You come when you come. It's there when you need it.
Yeah.
And you hear it. You actually hear what it is. So could you tell me just, I could talk to you all day. Like one, like a little amends, not a little bit, and a time when you went back, or and amends, perhaps about, you told us this beautiful story where I also, it's like forgiveness is about, you're about cleaning your side of the street or whatever, but touched on that if you could a little bit.
Sure.
That's-
Well, one of the classic Wes stories, in treatment at 30, we didn't have cell phones. That was the year 1989, and they said, don't use the payphone to call your family. Just take it easy. We'll let you call them later. And so I went to my daily treatment regimen, and in that process, for 2 days, I'd had John Bradshaw on the family. Just great nuts and bolts of what goes wrong with families that are enmeshed and that are dysfunctional. Well, I was a family expert in 2 days. So I went and got on the phone and I said, Mom, get Dad on the phone. You're not going to believe this. Dad gets on. I proceed to tell my family what went wrong all those years in our family, 5 kids, Mom and Dad. And I just laid it all out. Donna was the hero child, and I was the scapegoat. My brother was the clown. I mean, I had all the roles. Dad, you taught us to walk on eggshells because you blow up, and Mom, you grew up with a rageaholic. I knew 2 days of John Bradshaw, and I was suddenly a family expert, making amends for that attempt at an amend. Was only because of the grace of my beautiful family, who must have just shaken their head and said, it's just Wes, honey. Let him stay in treatment. He'll be better soon. So 6 months later, Alamo Cafe, San Antonio, they sat across from me and let me make amends for being such a boob on that phone call to them. So I've made good use of amends along the way, and there have been plenty of those moments. But I will say this: I started at 16. I used to hear the word uncoachable. My opera teacher at 20 said, are you ever going to listen to anything I'm trying to teach you, or do you just love your voice that much? I don't have to tell you my awful answer to the question, but I was called uncoachable until in my 50s. I got a health coach, and I went through a period where I lost some weight. I'd learned to take care of myself. And she said, and I quote, you might be the most coachable client I've ever worked with. And I said, hallelujah, Jesus, I have become coachable. So we all have an opportunity to make amends for our past behaviors. And thank God for a universe that's full of grace and mercy, because I have needed my share of it. No doubt about it.
And I love it. I love it. And the more that we keep doing this and working, it's like we can laugh and knowing that, oh, I'm in that spot again.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
but
no.
we know what to do. Yeah. I'm not back then.
Lesson one. Maybe, is there a way we can move on to yeah, there's a way.
Wow. This has been such a pleasure. I'm so grateful for, gosh, so grateful for you, and giving everybody a little taste of Texas here, right? And what we like to do at the end is, first of all, take a deep breath in and honor you for coming and your vulnerability into speaking, of your life. And we want to ask you, as our community of paradigm shifters, what can we hold for you? What would you just love?
Mm.
You know, a year from now, 3 years from now, what can we, as our spiritual community is growing and growing globally, what would we love? We'd love to send that energy your way.
Okay, all right, here it is. You asked. I am about to embark on an acting career, and I am very close to making my first few auditions. Something I used to do. Guitar's been under the bed for 20 years. It's coming out. It's coming out, and it's been doing that for the last year. And I just wrapped my fourth acting class with a great teacher here in Austin, and I'm about to start auditioning. So I hope you will see me on some other screen somewhere, if that's what the universe has, and that it'll be as much fun as it has been getting ready for it. And so if you'd like to hold for me the notion that I step into what the universe may be calling me to do, I'd be so honored for that. And I will not forget that. I don't remember how many thousand people you told me are on this thing, but I will be more grateful than you know for that.
All right. Well, we don't hope it. We know it.
Okay. Okay.
I was like, well, yeah, just ask anybody, like, what would you love? And my daughter says, don't tell my mom that unless you're really serious.
I love it. She knows you. She knows you.
That's what I do for a living, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so we know. Okay, Wes Phillips, that'll be on the marquee, eh? Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, and we can see ourselves in like pulling up at the opening of whatever, and on the sign, you know, like, yeah, we've been waiting for this all of our lives. And the journey continues.
Okay.
Honoring the journey of Wes. So
Love it.
here we go. Now, here's what we do now. We go like this, and we're rubbing our hands, and you get to receive. It's the law of receiving is a spiritual law. I know
Okay.
that.
Okay.
And the law of receiving is we are giving our energy to you, Wes. And okay, here you go.
Mm. See if we can see that.
All around the world coming to you from
Mm.
Austin. Yeah. Feel it,
Mm.
claim it, believe it. We're powerful. Thank you so much, Wes. What a joy you are. And so looking forward to, wow, your next journey. Thank you for sharing that with us. And we know it to be so. Amen.
Thanks, Judy. Thank you.
So it is.
Mm.
So we
Amen.
let it be.
Mm.